Hi everyone, I'm Dom Griffin and you're watching the Armchair Auteur. This is an ongoing video series I do where we talk about movies, television series, comics, books, lots of stuff. We talk about everything on here, but if you like movies, you like movie adjacent popular culture, and you like to see somebody pick those things apart, then you're in the right place and you should consider subscribing. Well, I'm back, and today we're reviewing Thor Love and Thunder, as you can tell from the wallpaper on my monitor, and also the fact that you clicked on something that said that. I know that in my Doctor Strange review, I said that that might be the last time I ever bother reviewing a new MCU movie, but circumstances being what they are, I'm back.
Back to me.
The circumstances being that I got invited to a screening for this movie, and I was desperate to get out of my apartment after being on quarantine for so long, and I ended up having a lot of thoughts about the film, and I thought that was the sort of thing I'm supposed to share with you guys. I still have a little bit of brain fog from recovering from my second bout of COVID, so if some of my thoughts are a little more scattered than usual, I apologize for that in advance. Oh, and of course, this is going to be a spoiler-free video. I just don't want anyone's feelings as hurt as mine were a few days ago when my friend Steven ruined Spielberg's Lincoln biopic for me by pointing out that Daniel Day-Lewis's accent as Abraham Lincoln sounds like Mr. Burns.
Holy God, what are you showing me? His head. Come on! Open your eyes!
I can't accomplish a goddamn thing of any human meaning or worth until we cure ourselves of slavery and end this pestilential war.
This man ruined my whole summer. But anyway, I would like to go on record that as much as I tend to gripe about the MCU, I do like many of the movies in its pantheon. I think Kenneth Branagh's work on the first Thor is severely underrated, and that the movie itself is a pretty entertaining time that holds up more than it ought to, all things considered. Thor the Dark World's biggest sin is just being boring and forgettable, but it's watchable enough, and the first time I saw Ragnarok, I was pretty in the bag for it. Bringing in a talent like Taika Waititi to reinvigorate a franchise that next to no one really cared about was a pretty good call at the time. It's a movie that takes its fair share of risks, or as close to risks as you can take in an insanely bankable film series that, by its very nature, cannot really afford to go for big swings. The very basic change that Taika brought to Marvel was understanding Chris Hemsworth's versatility as a comedic performer and tapping into a broader, cutesy himbo take on the character. And it works surprisingly well. The Hulk stuff, Tessa Thompson's Valkyrie, Goldblum, all worthy additions. It's a sci-fi throwback that feels like Flash Gordon, but, I don't know, vaguely more twee. Whatever, it works. I probably would have been more excited about a new Taika Waititi Thor movie, maybe like a week after having first seen Ragnarok, but that was years ago, and I'm a different person now. More specifically, I'm a person who has seen Jojo Rabbit. And while I'm aware how beloved and celebrated this film is, I absolutely fucking hate it, and could not possibly have turned on a filmmaker more after having seen it. The only two people I'd want to see do a new film less would be Lin-Manuel Miranda or Jake Novak.
I want to be the next SNL cast member, and here's why I should be a contender. Hi, Lord Michaels, I'm Jake Novak, and I know that you're feeling the heat because your roster lost Cade, Kyle, 80, and Pete. That means you got an open seat, and I feel I ought to be feeling it, because when it comes to comedy songs, I kind of been killing it.
So, given my new stance, why was I so willing to give Love and Thunder a chance? Well, for one, Natalie Portman is back, and I always thought she was given short shrift in the MCU, and it would be fun to have back as Jane Foster. And two, Taika is pillaging the work of Jason Aaron, probably the most prolific Thor writer since Walt Simonson, dually adapting his God Butcher arc, as well as the mighty Thor that saw Jane Foster herself wield Mjolnir for a time. It's some of my favorite comics of the new millennium, and even a watered-down for mass consumption adaptation is enough to at least entice me. So I'm gonna lead with all the positivity I can muster for this film. I did like quite a bit of it, I will be honest. But if you saw my Elvis video, you may understand and know that I'm kind of in a bit of a rut at the moment. And I regret to inform you that Thor Love and Thunder did not bring me out of that rut. I still feel very closed off from enjoying things for the most part. So, you know, take that as sort of a caveat to my feelings on this film. I'm not out of the woods yet, and Thor Love and Thunder did not, you know, snap me out of the doldrums. But there are things I did genuinely dig about it. Firstly, I think it must be said that the splashy, colorful look and irreverent tone Taika brings to the Thorniverse is a pleasant change of pace from most MCU flicks. I'm not going to pretend it's a drastic departure, but the costume design and adherence to a brighter, more vivid color palette, it's very welcome. Taika swaps out Led Zeppelin for Guns N' Roses as Love and Thunder's sonic core, but this outing maintains some of its Flash Gordon vibe. It just also, in its best scenes anyway, feels decidedly like a trashy 80s flick the Cannon Group might have foisted upon audiences 30 years ago. I'm aware that for most people, earnestly comparing a movie to Masters of the Universe is something of a non-starter, maybe a backhanded compliment, but I'm of the mind that more superhero movies should be that dumb and ridiculous, not less. I also admire at times the film's attempts at being so hard on his sleeve with the film's central romance and its overall sweetness. The movie uses Thor's adorable himbo persona as its guiding light, and that allows it to keep much of the charm from the first film. My friend Justin sometimes reduces the overall reception to new Phase 4 Marvel movies with the phrase sort of like, oh, it's fun, like it's just fun, you know, because generally speaking, some of these newer movies are so, you know, vaporware, they're so forgettable that when someone wants to tell you, oh no, I liked it, and you ask why would you like about it, they can't really say much more than, well, it was fun, I had a good time. And it tends to be sort of a signifier that the movie itself is like not very good. That like ultimately, well, it was bright and it was loud and there was a few explosions, so that makes it okay. But I have to say, I did find parts of this film fun, genuinely. Like I genuinely did enjoy it. Like, during the movie, I started to feel like, I think this is the most I've liked an MCU movie since maybe the first time I saw Black Panther, but then a little bit removed from having seen it, I saw last week. I think I actually liked Black Widow more than this, which is weird because that's like not a movie that I love necessarily, but I just felt like it had more parts of it that felt like a real movie, if that makes sense, and the performances in that movie were all very good. But there were a lot of moments throughout the film's like first half or so where I really did have this feeling of like, hey, maybe Taika's going to pull this off. Maybe I'm going to end up actually really digging this movie, you know? Like, the seeds were there. But by the film's end, that just wasn't really the case. All the issues that I have with this movie sort of all mirror the same sort of depressing, like, seesaw. First, I thought, wow, Christian Bale's Gore might end up being one of the best villains the MCU has ever produced. Bale really tries throwing his all in what amounts to an underwritten, pale imitation of the source material, and through sheer force of will, he comes close to pulling it off. But there are other parts where I felt like this was as laughable and forgettable as Christopher Eccleston's work as Malekith in Dark World. I was incredibly stoked to have Natalie Portman back aboard, and wanted to see her get more to do, more to sink her teeth into, but no, she's just kind of there. She looks cool, for sure, and gets to do fun hammer stuff, but this doesn't feel any more substantive than either of her last two outings, which is astonishing considering her arc. Hemsworth continues to have a lot of fun in the lead role, but with less variety in setting and cast, his Thor has to do more heavy lifting than in Ragnarok, and often doesn't have anything substantial to play off of, leading to repetitive scenes of him doing what feels like a shtickier take on something that worked well before, but comes off as pained now. Essentially, my main issues with Thor Love and Thunder boil down to three separate problems that are all pretty connected. Ragnarok, when it came out, was arguably, maybe still is, like the funniest MCU movie. Your mileage may vary on that, but like it's a funny movie. It's like a fun thing. It's pretty good. And I think because it did so well in that area, this time out, Taika just doubles down on playing up the comedy side of things, which I guess makes sense on paper. But so much of it just falls flat. I genuinely cannot remember the last time I saw a movie that wanted me to laugh this desperately, but failed to do so at almost every turn. Every time I know this movie wanted me to like guffaw loudly and like spill popcorn on myself or whatever, I just kind of like I chuckled a couple times, I felt myself smirk a little bit, and obviously I happened to be, you know, in sort of the downward slope of like a depressive cycle. But even when I'm depressed, I laugh at things. I enjoy things. You know what I mean? I had a very, very bad depressive period in the middle of 2021 when the second season of I Think You Should Leave with Tim Robinson came out, and I watched it on a loop for days, and I laughed constantly because it was still like I still think things are funny when I'm sad.
Big fat load of cum then.
But here, every time Taika is the giant rock guy, or Thor, or whoever, we're just doing like bits and just mugging for the camera. I was just like, why are we doing this? Like, what is the point? Like, I know it's supposed to be funny, but it's not. It's just not funny. The problem with that is that it puts so much effort into trying to be funny for so much of the movie that when the movie pivots and needs you to not be thinking about humor and needs you to actually like kind of feel some of the sincere things it's going for, it doesn't work because like it's so lopsided. Say what you will about the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and I myself am no big defender of them, but in both movies so far, James Gunn does a much better job of juggling comedy and drama. I'm not sure anyone in these 29 feature films that make up the MCU was doing the work Sean Gunn and Bradley Cooper did together as Rocket in the first film, or Michael Rooker's turn as Yondu in Volume 2. Volume 2 is like, kind of a shitty movie, but when I get to Yondu's death, I tear up every time. I didn't tear up at any of the heavy stuff in this movie. Any of the things they were going for that were supposed to be sort of big and epic and kind of sad, I was just like, okay, well, I know what's happening here. I respect what's going on, but I don't feel connected to it the way I'd like to, which is sad considering how close I was to the source material. It's because this is a movie that just can't adequately shift tone. Secondly, from a structural perspective, like a screenwriting perspective, this is a movie that just feels bare. I remember when Venom Let There Be Carnage came out, and I was so stoked at its short running length. But that is a movie that genuinely feels like it doesn't have a second act. It just careens to the climax entirely too quickly. And Thor Love and Thunder, similarly, is only like 2 hours flat, a little under, I think. It's a good thing, I think. It's good that this is a movie that isn't overly padded with teases to a future Disney Plus series or other things later in Phase 4 or whatever. Like, it's largely self-contained, and I appreciate that. But something about it feels like it's missing. I think maybe some of that is the fact that it's so padded with comedy bits that don't land, that if you actually break down like what happens in the movie plot-wise, it feels like there's not enough. It kind of feels like in Grindhouse, when Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino both had to pull a reel out of Planet Terror and Death Proof respectively to sort of match like the Grindhouse tone of those movies that would travel the country on film, and sometimes you would just miss reels and like they'd have to watch the movie missing a chunk of it. It feels like a chunk is missing. Not like a crucial chunk, but something is just not there. I took my friend Cody to see this movie with me, and there was a point in the film where I turned to my left and he had fallen asleep. My boy was slumped. And he woke up roughly 20-25 minutes later, I would say, and after the film, when we were walking back, he was like, hey, what did I miss in the part that I was asleep? And I told him exactly what it was, like beat for beat, like plot-wise. And he just looked at me and he was like, so nothing. I missed nothing. And I was like, yeah, actually, yeah. Like, essentially nothing happened in the 25 minutes you were asleep. And it's kind of not a good sign. But both of those issues, I think, are tethered to the primary problem. Taika is adapting two separate Thor stories that each have their own sort of profound themes at play. And he tries to just mush them together under this reductive umbrella that doesn't play for me. The God Butcher arc is so thrilling and fascinating because it feels like the movie Seven, but it's someone serial killing literal gods and questioning the power structures of reality. At a time where the people in power in this country and others are abusing that authority with little care for the most marginalized in society, it's a little depressing to see how badly Taika fumbles this on the big screen. Although, given how infantile his perspective on politics tends to be, maybe it's a blessing in disguise that he didn't probe deeper here. But also, Jason Aaron is a writer who really knows how to blend pathos with ridiculous pulp shit, and Taika just isn't. It feels like another hollow, vapid, choose love story that sort of hopscotches over texture and nuance to deliver a story that is just so blunt and broad, but like not in the fun way parts of the movie really are, in the way that feels like, man, you read all of these Thor comics that this guy wrote, and this is what you cherry picked from it, and like this is all you got out of it. Like there's so many cool ideas at play in those books. And I'm not saying you have to make like a pitch perfect note for note adaptation. Like so many of the best things in the MCU work because they don't do that. So I'm not saying that's what's wrong with it. I'm just saying that like this doesn't properly synthesize the things that work in the comic in a way that makes it work on screen. And it feels like what you're watching is like very dumb. And like the best parts of this movie are dumb in a fun way. They're dumb in like an adorable, kind of sincere, heartfelt sort of way. But the rest of it is dumb in like a fucking stupid way. Like dumb in a way that's like a little bit offensive. Like I'm not going to give away more plot points and stuff. And I think I've done an okay job of not getting too deep into the details of the story because I don't want anyone to have it ruined for them. But there's a thing that happens in the climax of this movie when I was like, this is the stupidest fucking thing I think I've ever seen in an MCU movie. Maybe I was overreacting. I'm thinking about it right now, but I think it's pretty close. And the reason that bothered me was because I kept feeling this up and down point of feeling like, wow, I like some of the visuals in this movie. I like that there's a couple of set pieces that don't look and feel like every other set piece in every other Marvel movie. That thing you see in the trailer where they're on what looks like a Sin City planet, everything's kind of black and white, that whole set piece is like really pretty interesting to look at visually, and it kind of works for me. But then some of the stuff that happens in the actual climax of the movie, I was like, this is less samey than a lot of other MCU third acts, but it's also so much dumber in some ways. By the time the movie was over, I just felt this inescapable, like cloying, irksome feeling about the movie, where it was like a bunch of stuff that I liked housed in a bunch of stuff that I didn't like. And those kinds of movies are some of the most frustrating to watch, because if I just hate a movie through and through, it's like that movie sucked, whatever. If I really like something, that's great. But like when a movie makes you like seesaw back and forth so much, it's like, what's going on here? How did this happen? Do I think you should see Thor Love and Thunder? I mean, maybe. It's only 2 hours. It has a really great cast. It has a lot of cool moments. Visually, it's pretty nice to look at for the most part. There's a couple of like typical sort of like screensaver bullshit, but for the most part, it's an improvement over the last few movies that came out under this umbrella. Russell Crowe is genuinely hilarious as Zeus. Really funny bit that he has in the middle of the movie, I think, even if it goes on a little too long. There's stuff in it that is worth, I think, going to the movies for. It's fun going to the movies, you know what I mean? There's that word again, fun. But my thing about this is, when I watched like Shang-Chi, Eternals, and some of these other Marvel movies, at almost no point in those movies did I feel like they were going to end up pulling it off and being good, you know? So it's both refreshing and frustrating to me that Thor Love and Thunder feels like it's going to be like the gem of phase 4 and like sort of a course correction of the way things have been going, and then ultimately is not. And that's kind of what bothers me about it. It bothers me that a director like Sam Raimi had to like fight tooth and nail to get some of the cutesier, weird Sam Raimi tick stuff into a movie like Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. But Taika kind of is left to his own devices and like does do whatever he wants to do. And I think he's left his own devices and allowed to do what he wants, because what he wants is kind of just as like toothless and interchangeable as what the whole brand is about now. And that's kind of a shame. Taika may have been a breath of fresh air on Ragnarok coming out of the Dark World, but if Thor gets a 5th outing, it might be time for someone else to offer a new perspective on the character. I don't know how much more of this I could really take. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Thor Love and Thunder. I hope you guys liked the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you loved it, please subscribe. I'll try to have more videos out throughout the summer of other movies that come out and stuff. Please feel free to let me know in the comments if there are any movies coming up that you'd like to see my take on or opinions on. There's honestly not very much coming out that I'm like genuinely excited about. At this point, the only 3 movies I'm living for are Greta Gerwig's Barbie, the Madonna biopic that she's directing, and Joker 2 Folie à Deux, because it looks like it's going to be ridiculous. Other than those 3 movies, everything just looks kind of like slop to me, and I hope that changes soon because it's kind of exhausting. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Please let me know in the comments if you have any questions about the movie, or any just thoughts about Thor in general, or I don't know, Chris Hemsworth abs, whatever you guys want to talk about. Thank you guys for watching and supporting the channel and being patient while I put out videos at such an erratic pace. I really appreciate the fact that anyone still watches. So hope everyone's doing well, staying safe, being good to yourselves and each other, especially yourselves. Please be good to yourselves this summer. It's not always easy, but it's important. Have a great week. Bye.